My name's Gavin Holt. I'm a fourth-year honours student at Abertay University, all the way up in Dundee. One of the organisers of the Security 3 conference that happened in January, and I'm the outgoing president of the Abertay Ethical Hacking Society. So I'll start with a brief summary of what we're covering today. So why password theft is so dangerous, because I think some people forget other replications other than, oh, we've already got a password stolen. How passwords are currently being stored, the good, the bad, and the plain text stupid. You can buy me a beer later. How Honeywords can be implemented, what Honeywords are, the benefits of Honeywords, why Honeywords will not save us all, a quick summary of everything we discussed, and then I'll take some questions. So why is password theft so dangerous? And there's a pretty obvious answer. Because someone has your password. It sort of speaks for itself. But the less obvious answer that this room will hopefully not resonate with is because then someone has your password for everything. PayPal did a survey 2 years ago. 60+% of users use the same password across multiple websites. So it doesn't matter if Facebook stores your password securely. If it's the same password for Tesco or any other place that has a password breach, they now have your Facebook password indirectly. There was a 300% increase in a single quarter in password theft. I think everyone will remember, boom, 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 big sites getting hit. And some of the numbers are absolutely scary. LinkedIn, 6.5 million, Zappos, 12 million, Evernote, 50 million, and the infamous Adobe, 38 million. And sometimes you wonder why we bother stealing passwords. Because you only need to steal passwords if you can't guess the password. So if we have a little look at some of the Adobe breach, this is a wonderful graphic that's online. So this is the Adobe password data on the left, and the password hints were in plain text. So rhymes with assword, 6 times 1. So with this sort of stuff here, you do kind of wonder why we actually still need to steal passwords. And in true geek fashion, there was an XKCD. It's the greatest crossword puzzle in history. Because all the password hints were in plain text and the passwords were ciphered. There's a lot of usernames and passwords out there, but I know what you're all thinking. People don't store passwords in plain text anymore, Gavin, do they? Anyone ever been to that website? The amount of people that store passwords plain text is ridiculous. Up until very recently, I believe the GCHQ recruitment system stored their passwords plain text. They already know it anyway, I suppose. Okay, but the big guys are doing it right, so that's fine. Your little coursework websites, plain text passwords, that's fine. But the big guys are doing it right. LinkedIn's 6.5 million passwords weren't salted. And even if people do salt passwords, they don't always use a per-user salt. All it takes is a time-memory trade-off. People can regenerate all the rainbow tables. So salting doesn't stop a targeted attack. And for you gaming guys who absolutely love your new graphics cards, that's great for hackers as well, because password cracking is getting faster. You don't even need to have a GPU in front of you. You can rent for about $2 an hour an Amazon cloud instance with a GPU and crack a ridiculous number of passwords. So making the hashing more complex and resource intensive is only part of the solution to stopping password theft, because once someone's got the dump, if they're determined to use it, they will. They can use targeted attacks, they can spend lots of time on it. But how do you know if your password's ever been stolen? So if you're a company, you might have IPS, you might have IDS, you might detect some anomalies. But how would you know if passwords have been stolen and used? And the chances are you probably won't. Some sneaky sysadmins might put some fake system accounts in their Active Directory or whatever. So for example, if Rory logs in, they can assume they've been compromised because user Rory doesn't actually work there. It's a fake account the sysadmins put in. It's a pretty nifty idea, honeypot accounts. But hackers are sneaky. They can look at the user account and see if it's actually used. They can see how often it's used. They can see its permissions, because if you create a honeypot account that's actually got access to your AD, then you're being stupid. So hackers, if they get access to this account, will be able to profile it and tell you if it's a legit account or not. So fake user accounts aren't quite foolproof. But we like the idea of making a high-risk guessing game for the attacker that has your data. So what if we had fake passwords? So this is where the concept of Honeywords come in. It was first discussed in a paper by 2 guys, Jules and Rivest, over at MIT last May. And the basic theory is, if for every user account, there are multiple passwords with only one legitimate password, can we detect password theft by watching for the use of known fake passwords in the database? So a traditional unsalted MD5 might look something like this. So Gavin's password's test1, Rory's password's test2, and Tiago's is password. So if this database was compromised, they would get a hold of the database, fire up something like John the Ripper or a big chunky rainbow table, and they'll get the plain text passwords back. Endgame, they've got your passwords. So let's implement Honeywords. So how would you even go about making fake passwords? They have to be believable. So if you've got 100 entries and 99 of them are really secure passwords and one of them's password, the real password stands out. Equally, if the user's got a really strong password and you've got cat, dog, mouse, sheep, or if they're all the same kind, if they'll all be typed by animals, the fake passwords become particularly obvious. So how do we make Honeywords? They have to be believable. There has to be some low-hanging fruit because they have to be crackable in order for the hacker to use them. There has to be some tough passwords to leave the attacker guessing if they've actually cracked the right passwords or not. As I discovered when I was writing a technical demo for this, you need to make sure that you don't accidentally generate a Honeyword for the user's actual password. That was in version 2 we fixed it. And we need to make sure that we can identify the fake passwords, because if you can, then you can't really use it. So I started with a dictionary, selected a handful of words of varying length, and in order to decide how hard I wanted to make the password to crack, I mangled it for upper and lowercase letters, sometimes prepended numbers and symbols, appended numbers and symbols, substituted symbols in, so 3s and 5s and S's and things, and then concatenate words together, again, making sure we don't accidentally use our user's password. So then we need to take a correct checksum of our user's password, and we need to create some fake checksums for all the Honeywords we've generated. So our database now looks something like this. So user Gavin, Rory, Tiago, and in a separate passwords table, you've got your password hashes and your checksums. So our new method of attack would be attacker gets hold of a database, fires up John, gets the plain text back. But in our example here, they've only got a 1 in 5, 20% chance of getting the right password. 1 in 5, still quite a big chance if you've got lots of users, lots of data, big critical system, but we can easily scale it just by adding more Honeywords. So what would the workflow look like for authenticating against that? You would start with your web server, take the password and hash it and pass it to the database server. The database server retrieves the checksum where the user ID and hash match and pass it to the authentication server. So if they don't get a hash match on that user ID, then it's just simply a wrong password. The user's mistyped, something like that. It's a wrong password, it's not a threat. If they do get a hit, it takes the checksum and passes it to an authentication server. Now, what the authentication server does is it performs an additional check, the same check used to generate the checksum on the hash that was sent. And what this does is it compares the hash that was sent, the checksum it was sent, and the checksum it generated to ensure that the password that you've typed in is the one that we took to be the user's true password upon generating all the Honeywords. And that will return true or false to the web server. So if the web server gets back true, great, real user login, they can log in. If it gets back false, at this stage, we know that yes, the password exists in the database, but no, it's not our user's password. Therefore, we know that our password database has been stolen. So in order to gain 100% certainty, the attacker would have to get into all 3 of these boxes and reverse engineer all the functions to get the checksums to see which password's correct. So now we need to know when a password that's been publicly added to our database is used, we can now detect password theft. Easy as that. Sorry for anyone that thought this was going to be really technical and clever. It's literally just more passwords. So what else can we do with it? We can do some clever things. So what if we regenerated the fake passwords periodically? Could we use that to determine when the password database was stolen? Internally, lots of companies have different login systems. They might not all use single sign-on. So what if you could use this to determine when you had a password breach and force users to reset the passwords across the board? So if you had a central API is the most common type of honeybee, by the way. Interesting fact. Because when you search APIs Honeywords, doesn't come up with much apart from pictures of bees. So a central API for a service to use. So you can pass all the known user IDs of compromised user into this service, and when they try and authenticate against something else in your organization, we can detect there's the potential their password's been compromised and force a reset across the company. So what are the benefits of Honeywords? They can be used to detect password theft. Now, this is based on my dissertation. I've done quite a bit of reading on it, Natalie, and there doesn't appear to be any other way of detecting password theft reliably. You can use IDS, you can use IPS, you can see that the data was exfiltrated. You can see successful login attempts from places you might not expect, but as far as I can tell, this is one of the few ways you can actually detect password theft. It can be used to prevent the use of stolen credentials. If you know a password's been stolen, you can now prevent its use across your whole organization. You can provide warnings to other services that this password is potentially getting reused, and it can be used to deter attackers from trying to compromise accounts. But as I said at the start, Honeywords isn't a magic solution. Honeywords isn't going to save us from everything. Honeywords won't stop your service being compromised. If I've got your password file, something has went wrong before now. If I'm able to exfiltrate this data from your database, get a hold of your password file, get access to your AD to dump the hashes, something's went wrong before now. Honeywords won't stop the passwords from being cracked. People will still potentially get the plain text correct password, so it's not stopping people from stealing passwords, it's just detecting their theft. Honeywords won't stop attackers from gaining the legit password by other methods, social engineering, keyloggers, or if the user's password is just password, it won't stop someone from just brooting it. Honeywords are not a replacement to a strong password policy and user awareness. If your users are still generating really, really crap passwords or are still being allowed to use really, really crap passwords, then Honeywords will not save you. Stanford University in the last 2 weeks have published quite a cool paper. And their theory is, the longer your password is, the less complex it has to be. And they've enforced this across their entire campus. So if you've got an 8-character password, it has to have 2 uppers, 2 lowers, a couple of symbols, has to meet a certain level of complexity. If you've got a 27-character sentence, that can be all lowercase. So they're not letting security get in the way of good passwords. They're allowing people to have really good passwords, but the people who are going to try and pick rubbish passwords, well, they're stopping them. So in summary, Honeywords allow for detectable password theft by seeding a database with known wrong passwords. Watching for these passwords in the system allows you to detect when they've had their database stolen by modifying passwords periodically. Honeywords should be of varying difficulty to disguise themselves. I think that's one of the most important things if you try and take this away to implement it is your Honeywords have to be uncrackable right down to low-hanging fruit, because if the word sticks out, you've lost the point of it. Honeywords are not a replacement for strong password policies, a strong storage mechanism, or getting your users to secure themselves. Has anyone got any questions about Honeywords or their implementation?
I have a question. You're saying that the wrong password should look legitimate?
Yeah.
And if somebody has an actually sort of random looking password and then you add the wrong entries to be cat, dog, sheep, etc., it's very noticeable how it works. So it's somehow the mechanism to generate wrong passwords should take into account the correct password to try to make wrong password that looks similar-ish or not, or you But that means that part of your system will know the plain text password, at least while it's processing the wrong entries.
Yeah, well, absolutely, but the system equally knows the plain text password when it's hashing it. So
it's usually you just get the password, you hash it, and then quickly store it out, and like forget about the plain text password just to make sure it stays in the system in plain text as least amount of time as possible. But if you have to generate it, well,
Yeah, it would be plain text in memory for a little bit longer. Hi.
Difference between someone using one of your Honeywords and someone just reinforcing the system?
That's something I've not worked out yet. If someone has a dictionary and they're brooting, then potentially they could, but we should be rate limiting attempts anyway, so the chances of it being in the first 4 attempts, 5 attempts are unfortunately slim. Again, if it happens, if the system resets itself, then that's something to look at, the threshold perhaps of when you would trigger an alert for theft. Any more? Oh, brilliant. I'm led to believe lunch is impending down in the main foyer. So I think if you head down there after this, it's lunch at just after 1:10 past.